Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone. People like shonen anime, right? Tournament arcs, unique cliched characters with their equally unique fantastical powers. Commander media of late has felt inundated with hipsters singing the praises of being a unique special brewer. It feels like it's firmly in the age of shonen hipster deck building. Everyone has to be unique. Everyone has to have something special. I'm among them too, don't get me wrong, but I hate shonen as a genre, so let me offer my stance here. Despite being a little hipster deck builder, I like when people enjoy things, including decks I think have boring constructions or play patterns. Krenko, Ayara, Atraxa, Bruvac, Hullen, far more. All commanders I would consider in this camp of being too generically good or offering too narrow a build path. Mathematically speaking, due to the popularity of these generic commanders, it's likely you have a deck I find boring in your collection. Just as a quick aside to show what I mean, let's look at Krenko Mob Boss. While the linear plan of make a quintillion goblins kill everyone isn't necessarily a game plan I find interesting, it still has a home at any table if the goblin player is having a good time doing it. Same thing with a generically good value engine like Atraxa too. While I do find her design egregious, that doesn't mean I find anyone who plays her to be so too. Simply put, even if there is a generically boring commander design across the table, it doesn't give me the right, or anyone the right, to fun police anyone out of enjoying their deck. I truly think that the only factor that should matter for your deck isn't the hipster factor, but how much you enjoy it. We all know this point comes with a couple of asterisks though. Firstly, while I can't dunk on anyone for having a generically strong deck like Hullen or a linear deck like Krenko, it's part of the same social contract that they aren't allowed to beg for mercy when I find it's the correct play to remove their commander for the 5th time. Or while they can, they just can't get annoyed by it. We all know what's going to happen when you untap with that card. Secondly, a deck, at least as far as casual goes, should at least somewhat take into account the joy of its opponent's experiences against it. You see, if you have a deck that's truly miserable to play against, whether that be a staple pile, a win-conless chaos deck that seeks to dry out the game for as long as possible, or just a turbo removal deck, people will not want to play against you anymore. This isn't me trying to be rude, and it's not an objective thing you can actively measure like a mana base or removal suite, but it's just a reality of Commander as a game. If you build decks that are annoying to face, people will not want to face them. When talking about this topic, the phrase Commander is a social format is thrown out quite a bit. And yes, it's true. The goal of a casual Commander game is to have a good experience with friends rather than just trying to maximize your win rate. But this being said, you can still have a deck that is annoying to play against, and yet it isn't because it's trying hard to win. Do not conflate annoying with being strong here. I have a deck that in my opinion fits into this boring generic category, that being Ayara, First of Locthwain. It's a simple deck. It wins with Grey Merchant, Exsanguinate, Kokosho Looping, or 20-minute Bolus's Citadel turns, all things you can expect out of a mono-black deck. It has a light life gain synergy throughout, and a fun hoarding Broodlord Saw in half line, but it's mostly just a pile of mono-black staples. Why does a hipster like me have this deck? Well, it's simple. I just like the brain-dead play patterns of mono-black Drain, and it's not that annoying to go against either. While my IR deck in part contributed to my need to make a video like this, there's also a YouTube comment on a recent video that sparked interest on this topic, and I've seen the sentiment echoed elsewhere on YouTube as well. I can't find it, and I'm so mad about it, but its exact wording is burned into my brain. Why do Commander YouTubers hate cards just for being good? Well, to answer this question quite plainly, most of us dislike cards for being too generic rather than being too good. Heuristic Study is the perfect example of a card that no deck is worse with. It will draw you cards, it will slow your opponents, and the opportunity cost is basically nothing, besides not being some weird enchantment polymorph deck or a Lurrus companion deck. These are the type of cards people bemoan, because they have no cost of inclusion. It's too easy to run, and it gives you too much, despite being that easy to include. People always root for an underdog, and Heuristic Study is very much not an underdog. I do have something to say though. and that is that generic cards that cause me great apathy, like Rhystic Study, are in the minority. In fact, I would say that there are certain times where generic cards are 100% justifiable and correct to play over more synergistic options, as an answer to a problem, or because you need them to enable a play pattern. You really need to take cards in the context they are being played. For instance, for the example of enabling a play pattern, Seedborn Muse is an abomination, and definitely in the camp of generically good card. I use it in my Ferrica deck to activate her mana-hungry ability more often, so I'm not quite using it in the same way that makes it live to its maximum potential like a Kinnan deck would be doing. Don't get me wrong, it's still a kill on sight though. As for the other example of using them to answer a problem your deck is facing, I always use the example of a Blink deck. Brago King Eternal, Thassa Deep Dwelling, Felia Exuberant Shepherd are all cards that lend themselves well to a true flicker plan. In these decks, it makes sense that you'd want to put some of your removal on ETBs, so that way you can turn them into a removal engine with your commander or other Blink enablers. Until you realize Torpor Orb exists. If your removal is tied all to enter the battlefield effects, which are now shut off, you're screwed unless you can successfully turn your below rate bodies into a beatdown plan. It is in these instances where genericism is actually a good thing, in my opinion, as it helps shore up a weakness. It's greedy of you here not to run the more generic cards. I got a bit of pushback about this example when I brought it up on the Magic Mirror podcast. I think people were hearing that you should put a Torpor Orb in your deck to blow out a Blink player and teach them a lesson. To be clear, no, I do not recommend you chase around your local Brago player with oops all Torpor Orbs trying to make their night miserable. What I meant is that you need to be ready to answer hate, because you will just encounter it in the wild, and if you can't, that night will become miserable for you. Decks like my Sephara Hate Bears Brew that use these effects to slow the game down just long enough to win with combat damage, and Elish Norn Mommy in the command zone, or Flage the Untouchable running a Torpor Orb to cast her without consequence. That last example, by the way, actually happened to me. I got splash damaged by the Flage's Torpor Orb with my Iara deck. Everything in that deck is shut off by a Torpor Orb. Even a deck with an artifact toolbox plan without a lot of enters the battlefield effects can run an orb to fetch. You need to be ready for this, not because I want you to push the synergy and joy and soul out of your deck, but because I want you to have a good time in as many games as possible, even in games where you face hate that specifically targets your deck. I think part of what contributes to this greedy removal problem is two-pronged. For one, people are scared to put cards like Torpor Orb in their deck to begin with, out of fear that it'll make them a jerk, so people just run into punishment less frequently. And secondly, it is because people aren't using the social aspect of the format to improve their range. The main reason why the idea of running a hate card like Torpor Orb is super controversial is because of the idea that it can hose someone who only gets to play like once a week. To have that one game a week sullied by some targeted hate can cause a feels bad. This is where I'd like to offer some pushback. I think a crushing loss to something like this is actually the perfect time to socialize. Hey man, that card crushed my deck. What do you recommend to counter it in future? I doubt the response will be, get good. So yes, while at first you might expect a Flicker player to mostly run removal on enters effects, I don't think it at all disingenuous to think that players, even casual ones, can grow and make their decks better. There is fun in learning how to subvert and counter resistance in this game. And if you don't have the knowledge to do it yourself, you can always ask outside the game for advice. Commander is a social format in more ways than one. Let socialization be a pathway to improvement, even if it isn't the goal of your game night. It can be a byproduct. Don't sell yourself short on your ability to learn and become better. In a similar vein as well to running on theme removal that is actually detrimental to a deck, I often see people run cards that mention a niche mechanic that either actually isn't good or is just not good for their deck. For example, I love Crime as a design from OTJ for multiplayer because of the way it actually rewards running worse cards in Commander that only target one player. My Judith deck runs a Crimes package because she and a lot of the other cards in that deck are great enablers for it. I even run Vindictive Broodwitch to take advantage of this package over the indisputably better in every way Zulaport Cutthroat. But I don't run Overzealous Muscle, Blood Hustler, or Rattleback Apothecary in this Crime package. These cards mention the mechanic I like, crime, but they don't do anything impactful with it that is worth playing in Commander. Yes, they mention the word I like, but they don't have a home in an aristocrat's focused deck. Be careful too, because some cards can look pretty enticing despite not being correct for your deck. Look at Gisa the Hellraiser or At Knife Point, two cards that trigger off criminal activity that I still don't have in my deck. This is because token generation for Judith is next to worthless, as she doesn't trigger from them dying. So while at first these cards might look like a shoo-in, they are in fact not, because they lack synergy with a major amount of my Aristocrats deck. They might perform fine with others, but when a card is okay with about 50% of my deck and does nothing with the other half, I'd rather just find a better card than try and embrace the clunky, more synergistic option here. I think in the end, I hate decks that go too all in on a fragile theme. This being said, if you enjoy your deck, it's okay if I hate it. I hope no one here heard push all the soul out of your deck. I just think that certain decks can benefit from being generic in some aspects, and you shouldn't feel bad for relying on that if your deck needs it. I'd love to hear if you disagree or agree with my opinions down in the comments below, especially with this episode. Also, feel free to tell me what generic cards or decks you love to play despite their popularity. And until next time, bye. Just as a quick aside, but they don't do anything impactful with it. Oh my God, I need to calm down.